Hi. All right. Welcome, everyone. So yeah, we're going to get started taking a deep dive into Angular builders. Something that I think not a lot of people are aware exist or have any knowledge of, but no worries. We're going to cover as much as we can. So, like Noah said, my name is Mike Hartington. You can find me on Twitter at Hartington. I work for Ionic. I'm also an Angular GDE. All that just to say, I know a thing or two about JavaScript and specifically Angular. So, what are Angular builders, and what do they even do? Um, well, I think if you were to ask me, like, what are the kind of like characteristics of a builder are, well, they're kind of like these behind the scenes, you know, details that make everything that the Angular CLI does possible. They really are the unsung hero. If you were to look at builders, they take some simple input and then they do stuff. It's a real simple principle, but it allows us as developers to not have to re-implement, say, our own Webpack or our own testing structure. So, developers, anytime you've run ng build, have a little secret to break. You've been running a browser builder. You've been running a builder that is provided by default from Angular. Anytime you've run something like ng-serve, you've been running a dev server builder. Even if you don't know it, you are using all of these builders. And for anyone who is running different tests or different testing frameworks, whether it's Karma, Jest, what have you, congratulations, you are running a Karma builder or a Jest builder. You have interacted with builders whether you know it or not. So if we work with builders all the time, how do they work and what are the details in here? And I'll preface this with just that builders work on the principle of given a set of options, run a function, and return the results. These are, this simple concept is how builders are capable of doing everything that they do for us. So, for instance, let's take a look at this, fairly typical Angular CLI or this Angular JSON file for our workspace. Say we have an app, and inside this app we have this build task or this architect. Essentially, anytime we run ng run app:build, we're executing this task. Now, at a high level, this just sets up all of the configuration for this task. This is the builder that we want to execute. Here are the options that we want to pass along to that builder. And then here are a list of overrides for different configurations, whether or not we're doing a production build, whether or not we are running in CI, or if we have a custom configuration that we want to implement ourselves. So this is really the only plumbing that we really need to know about for how builders operate. So let's just kind of dive in and make a builder then to see the details. First, answer the question, why do we need to do this? Why do we really care? If you think about what the CLI does, it definitely does not cover every single use case. Like, yes, it gives you our build tools, our dev servers, our testing frameworks, but what about image optimization? What about other analytics or different deploy targets? What if we want to deploy to Firebase or to some other hosting provider? What if we actually just want to customize the default Angular builder? So knowing how to do some of this stuff can let us achieve these goals. And really, it's kind of a humble brag. If we can go to our coworkers and say, hey, I know how to customize the builder. Do you? That's a nice little pat on your back. So to start off, we're just going to, approach this like we would any node project. We'll create a directory, we'll cd into it, and then we'll init whether we're using npm or yarn. And then we're going to take our package JSON and add this entry to it called builders. Now, builders is going to point to another JSON file. And that JSON file is going to contain a list of different builders that our package is going to expose to the Angular CLI. So in this case, we have the command builder that we're listing out, and its implementation, or the function that's actually going to get run, is going to be listed in this directory, builders, command builder, index.js or .ts. We will also provide a schema, essentially just a list of different options, default values, and ways for the Angular CLI to validate that whatever we pass to our builder is correct, and it's something that the builder expects to get. And then finally, because we're good developers and we would like to make sure that our code is clear in its intention, we'll add a description. In this case, we're just going to build a builder that runs a shell command. So all of this kind of pieced together, I hope that you can kind of see the connections on how a builder and how this lookup process works. So inside of our package JSON, we have the package name at Ionic builders. And inside of the Angular JSON, we have a builder key that points to that same package. The colon followed by the next phrase is going to be that lookup. So hopefully you can see that lookup and how the package name and then the builder name all kind of combine together. And then we point that to the implementation, and that is what gets called. So inside of the implementation detail, all we really do is export this default function called create builder. Now, create builder is provided by the Angular Dev Kit. So it's not something that we have to write ourselves, but we do need to write the function that it calls. In this case, we are going to create a function called command builder, which is going to get executed whenever we run our command builder itself. Inside of this function, we get two arguments. We get a list of options, which is just a JSON object. And then we get the running context that our CLI or that our builder is in. So whatever information is available to us from the CLI, like the different deploy projects that we are running, the name of the builder, any information about our current workspace that we could get. And this is going to return a promise of a build event. It does not necessarily need to return a promise. You could return an observable or just the build event itself. It could be synchronous. In this case, we're just going to use promises because it's simpler. So inside of our command builder itself, we're going to import child process from Node, and then we're going to create a new process where we will take the we'll grab off the command and arguments keys from our options. So we'll expect that the user passes us a command and then an array of different arguments to shell out into that command. So we'll create a new process. And then inside of this process, we're going to listen to standard out and standard error, and then utilize context.logger to just print this out to the terminal. So anytime there is data coming out from our new process, print that to the terminal. If there's an error, print it with some, red syntax highlighting. If you've worked with any node logger before, this should feel pretty familiar. Now, what we want to do is actually return a new promise that when the process closes, we're going to resolve an object that is that has a key of success and a true or false value based on the exit code. So if the exit code is 0, which most shell commands will return if it ran successfully, then the actual builder was successful as well. So all of this kind of put together, we have like 20 lines of code minus imports where we are running a command builder. We're getting input from our from either our workspace file or from a command line flag. We get the context. We're printing out all the data. We essentially have made our own builder. So let's take a look at what this operation does and how this behaves. So first, I'm just going to look into my Angular JSON file, and I happen to have the command builder here already highlighted. So in the command builder, we have, like I said, the task name, which is arbitrary. We could change this to be whatever we want. And then we have the builder itself. So this is pointing to that implementation where we have the package name and then the builder name lookup. By default, whenever we run this with no configuration passed, we are going to just call the ls command and then pass in the command line flags of -la. So this is just going to format the output a little bit into something a little bit more readable. Now, for production, we're going to actually run a completely different command. This is going to be the cow say command. There is no pig say or goat say, unfortunately, so we have to deal with cows. And all it's just going to print out to the command to the terminal is builders are cool, which I would agree with this statement. So let's clear out of this, and I'm just going to run this real quickly, bump up the font size just a little bit, and we'll run ng-run app and then command build. And this should print out all the files in this directory because we're just running ls-la. And now that it's run, we can see all the outputs, and yeah, it's doing basically what we would expect it to do. So if we were to pass in a different configuration, let's say we had production as the configuration here, we'll use the cowsay tool to print out builders are cool, and we have a nice little cow. It doesn't really look that much like a cow, if you ask me, but we will take the command's output and say, yep, builders are cool. We can kind of get a cow. Okay, well, that's not very, I don't know, actionable. That's not really cool. It doesn't really do anything that I can go to my work and justify spending the time implementing. What if we need something more complex? What if we want to modify the Webpack configuration and add a new plugin? Well, there are different tools that already exist for this in the community, but if you just have one plugin that you want to add, some of them might be overkill. We can do the same thing with a simple builder that just modifies the configuration. So let's start off the same way as we did with our command builder and have this export default create builder, and then we will have a function called extend existing builder. We're just going to call the existing builder and pass in some different options. So our options in this case is going to be the name of another builder that we want to call, and then the context is the same, and then the observable or the return value is going to be an observable of builder output. So we're going to work with Rx in this case. Now in here, we want to first grab the target task that we want to run. Basically, we want to grab the project, the target, or the different tasks that we want to run, and the configuration for that task. So this is going to be, if we think about the command line input that we ran before, it was the target was app, or the project was app, the target was command build, and the configuration was production or not. So in this case, we'll have app, the target being build, which is going to be our default Angular builder, and then the configuration, so production or not. Okay, well, with this piece of information, we can now go ahead and grab two more pieces of data that we need. We need to grab the default options for that builder. So these are going to be the configuration, the options set in our Angular build workspace builder, and then the builder name, or the actual builder value name value that we want to run. It's a little confusing with these names, but when we look at the Angular workspace, it should all make sense. Now, these are both promises, and context kind of works on sometimes it's promises, sometimes it's synchronous. So in this case, we're just going to convert it to an observable with from, and then we will use fork join to combine all of these observables together, and then we will grab them and pipe them into a new observable with concat map. So in here, we'll destructure the options and then the name that we're going to return, and then call context.validate options. Now, this kind of reflects back to that idea of a schema, of having a list of all options that are available to a builder and whether or not they have and what their default values are. So in this case, if my default build options that are my argument say its only value is to build with AOT enabled by default, well, there's a lot of other configuration options that we could pass to that, but we just haven't provided them. Well, the builder should have a default value set for most of those options. And validate options is going to take the list of known options and then compare that against the list of default values provided by the implementer or provided by the schema. So once we have all of these options kind of return, validate public options with the internals. Once we have all of these values, we're going to call another function. This time it's going to call it extend builder, and it's going to grab this execute browser builder, which is the public facing implementation for our default Angular builder. We'll pass in the finalized options and then the context for this as well. So what does this extend builder do? Well, this extend builder takes a builder and it returns a function which has the options and context that are provided. And then we call that builder that we passed, and then we can pass in the options and the context, but then we get access to this third parameter, and this is going to give us access to the Webpack configuration. So this is where we can set up new different entry points. This is where we can provide new plugins. We didn't want to do anything, and we just wanted to see what the internal Webpack config for Angular is. So we could console log that and print that out. And then we would return the configuration. Now, in this case, we want to add a new plugin, and I can think of no better plugin to add than the Nyan Progress plugin, which is super fun and just makes all of our builds a blast. So wrapping this whole thing up, we're roughly 40 lines of code to extend an existing builder. And this could sit inside of our project. This could sit as its own standalone package, and we could just have this work. So let's see the demo for this. So we'll open up our Angular JSON again, and I'm going to collapse the command builder and take a look at the extend builder. So our extend builder is going to be the task name. It's going to point to the builder at Bionic Builders, /extend build. And then here is that options and browser target key that we're setting. Now notice it is calling app build, which is internal to this project. So all this is really doing is just coming up to this build task that we have, the basic build settings that are provided to every project. And it's going to just call this and utilize all of these options and the overrides based on the configuration. So that's really all we're doing. We're just grabbing these options and validating everything. So once this runs, we could do ng run app extend build. And once this starts kicking off, hey, we'll have a nice little Nyan cat printed out in the background. It's going to do its thing. And when the build is done, we have a nice clean output. Now, it gets even better when we do it with production enabled, because production builds take a little bit longer. So we have a more time to spend with the Nyan cat. And really, if you don't have a Nyan cat flying across your terminal, are you really even doing any work? I think no. So let's kind of go back and wrap things up a little bit. So what have we learned? We hopefully you've learned that builders aren't actually that complicated. There's a lot of moving parts, but they're really just functions, and you compose all these functions together to do something. The real trick here is that it can be difficult to find out what you need to use or what functions you need to call. Most of these APIs and the things that I was showing off came from the Angular Dev Kit packages, collection of packages, and they aren't fully documented. So you kind of just need to find an example that exists out there and see what they did. It's trial and error by most part. I will say that the default browser builder for Angular is a great source of information. It was roughly around 820 lines of code, including utility functions, internal, some imports, and it covers every single use case. So it's a pretty complex example. You can see basically everything that you want to do, and there's types involved. So even if you aren't sure what you're looking at, there's bound to be some types, and you can follow that along and basically autocomplete your way to glory. Now, there are some other great examples out there if you want to take a look at. These are all the GitHub usernames and repos. Minko has his own builder example. Santosh has a collection of different builders under the package name at Angular Builders. You can check those out and see various examples of how to provide a custom Webpack config, how to include more detailed logging, etc. Manfred, of course, has a bunch of different builders all around the idea of NGUPex Build Plus. His latest one, I think, has been working with Webpack 5 and Module Federation. So, of course, it's going to have some pretty complex and pretty interesting stuff to look at. Angular Shul has a different type of builder. This one is based on the idea of a deploy, where you can deploy your Angular app to GitHub pages. This would also include things like the Firebase deploy, Netlify, etc. Of course, there's the one that I built that I help maintain for Ionic called Angular Toolkit. We have a collection of different builders varying from just setting a few different options to extending the built-in Angular builder like we saw in our second example. So that is code that I'm using in production. So kind of parting thoughts, look at your projects that you work on a day-to-day and ask if a builder could help you. If you have various different tasks or you are chaining together different NPM tasks, a builder could come in here and unify your different build setups and give you one task to run. So it could just make the whole entire process much more streamlined versus having to realize, okay, should I chain together this tasks and these tasks, and then, okay, what are my different options? Let a builder take care of it, and you'll be happy. Don't feel like you need to follow exactly what exists out there. There are, plenty of different ways to build a builder. Not every single one of them is going to look exactly the same, but that's kind of, the beauty of it. And now that I've said probably the word build and builder like half a dozen times, thank you so much for the time. If you have any questions, happy to answer them inside of the Slack or, maybe in the Zoom later, or if you just want, reach out on Twitter. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.